Fun fact about me, one of my favorite things to study is history. And not the boring kind of like high school history, which is all just learning a bunch of useless dates, but actual history that is the stories of our ancestors. I grew up with a lot of religious abuse. So as I got older, that actually led me to studying the history of Christianity, and that rabbit hole kind of took me all the way through the history of women and the rise of the patriarchy. So today I want to talk about where I see history repeating itself and do a little comparison between the witch trials and these modern day attacks on women's rights. So let's just start with the witch trials were never about witches. They were always just about controlling women. For those of you who are not familiar with the witch trials, from the 15th to the 18th century, the numbers range anywhere from tens of thousands upwards to millions, depending on what history book that you read. Anyway, millions of people, mostly women, were accused, tortured, and executed throughout Europe and America. But the trials weren't about witchcraft at all. They were just a tool for religious institutions, governments, and male authority figures to suppress women who didn't conform to their societal norms. Women were often accused for being too independent, like widows, single women, or business owners. Also for practicing medicine or healing, like midwives and herbalists. And for speaking out against authority, like religious or political leaders. And the thing is, these accusations didn't need any real evidence. They thrived on just fear and hysteria and control, just like these modern attacks on women's autonomy. So I want to make a few comparisons to today's modern attacks on women. Back then, women were accused and punished based on vague and moralistic accusations. And today, the same thing is happening. Women are being criminalized for choices about their own bodies, often without any real evidence. When it comes to controlling women's bodies, back then, women's bodies were scrutinized for witch marks, and their reproductive choices were demonized, and midwives and herbalists were accused of being witches. Now, laws restricting abortion rights, like abortion bans, birth control bans, all of those are just a repeat. They just echo those same restrictions and control over women's bodies. How about punishing women who don't conform? Back then, women who were independent, outspoken, or challenged traditional roles were accused of being witches. And now, women who demand autonomy, it doesn't matter where, in politics, in activism, in their bodies, in their workplace, they are vilified, they're harassed, and they're criminalized sometimes. And of course, there's always religious and political justifications. Back then, authorities claimed that persecuting women was necessary to protect morality and purity. And today, politicians justify restricting women's rights with religious rhetoric, and they argue that controlling women's bodies is for the good of society. And then, of course, there's the surveillance and public shaming. Back then, people were encouraged to spy on their neighbors, especially if they were women, and accuse them of witchcraft. And today, many states are trying to track women's menstrual cycles or pregnancy outcomes, and look at how many of them are encouraging reporting their neighbors and even getting financial rewards for doing so. And of course, using fear as a tool for compliance. Back then, they held public witch trials and executions to create fear and force women to conform. And now we have laws criminalizing miscarriage, travel bans for people seeking abortions, and threats of jail time that all just create a culture of fear to prevent women from their right. So let's compare some of the historic witch trials that mirror what's going on today. There is the Bamberg and Würzburg witch trials that happened in Germany between 1626 and 1631. That one was one of the largest witch hunts in history, with over 900 women executed. Many of those women were educated, wealthy, or independent, and therefore a direct threat to the male-dominated power structures. And today, women in power, from politicians to CEOs across the board, do receive backlash and are often forced to step out of leadership roles. Then there was the Pendle witch trials in England in 1612. Most of the accused women there were poor women who relied on midwifery and healing skills to survive. But they were demonized for their knowledge and for stepping outside of traditional gender roles. And today, of course, women's reproductive choices are being restricted, especially for low-income and marginalized communities, which of course just limits their autonomy and their ability to thrive. And who can forget about the infamous Salem witch trials in colonial America from 1692 to 1693. Women there were just accused with zero evidence, often just based on rumors and mass hysteria. And once you were accused, there was no proving yourself innocent at all. And today, women are being prosecuted for miscarriages, even when it is just a natural thing that happens to all women who are sexually active. Just like those women were in the past, were convicted with no proof whatsoever. And the last one I want to bring up is the Scottish witch hunts, which happened from the 16th to the 18th century. There, the government specifically used witch trials to enforce gender roles and targeted women who refused to conform, because women were seen as a threat if they had power, influence, or independence. And of course, today's political push to limit women's educational opportunities, reproductive autonomy, and their leadership opportunities is all just following the same oppressive pattern. Big picture, this is about power and not protection. The witch trials were never about actual witches. They were about controlling women, using fear, surveillance, and punishment to enforce obedience. And the same tactics are at play today. Reproductive rights are being stripped away. Women's autonomy is constantly under attack. And laws are being used to punish women who don't conform. This is literally a modern-day witch hunt. So what can we do? First, learn your history. The witch hunts didn't end because they ran out of women to murder. They ended because people fought back. They stopped believing in the bullshit and they fought back. And so you have to speak out. The more you call this what it is, a political tool of oppression, the harder it is for them to get away with using it. And support women's rights. Challenge those laws. Support organizations that are fighting back. And refuse to let history repeat itself. And share this video so more people can see the pattern. My last video cut off, but I just wanted to add my final thoughts. We have the power to end this cycle again. But first, we just have to recognize the witch trials never really ended. They just changed form. And we are not going back.